All right. So here I am with Krackatoa. For those that you don't know, Krackatoa is a editor or administrator of Dustloop.
Uh, I am the experimental media guy.
Okay. The
They're like,
experimental
no
media
one wants to
guy.
run the social media page. And I'm like, oh, I'll do it. And that was it. That was it.
That's
Um,
interesting. But
yeah.
Krakatoa, editor or experimental media guy of Dustloop, which for Siege people, because some of my people are 6 Siege related, Dustloop is pretty much an aggregate wiki knowledge base for a number of fighting games, which kind of takes information for all of the characters, all of the system mechanics, and puts it all in one place. And I guess we'll start there. Why is Dustloop and its existence and sites like it, like Dream Cancel, so
Hmm.
important for the FGC?
Um, that's a good question. I will say that we've tried many ways of compiling information over the years, like collectively as a community. Not me. I haven't done anything but my YouTube videos and like the occasional Faust Wiki article. But generally, we've. I'm not sure if you remember Game Facts, Game
Uh,
FAQs, right? Poll
Before
of the
my
day.
time.
Before your time, excellent, good. It's better that way. If you ever want to laugh, go look up old fighting games and their guides, their written guides, their walkthroughs or whatever on Game Facts. You can still get them, I think.
Oh
And it's
my.
like combo notation is done in like ASCII art. Like it's oh my god. And all of the documentation was not collaborative. It was just like Ralph in his underwear at home, right? Putting together his Alpha 2 guide and posting it up on GameFAQs. So we also had like the era of, so there was GameFAQs.
Yeah.
We had the era of like forum posts, right? So like shoryuken.com and stuff like that, where people would write like advice, people would have discussions, feedback, and whatever. Um, then wikis came around and they were used usually to like record frame data, maybe combo routes, stuff like that.
Okay.
Very bare bones. It was mostly just like, oh, here's some data points. We'll keep it all as a repository. Um, and then Discord happened. And Discord, everyone moved into Discord, and suddenly you had Discords for every character of every fighting game. And you have like, so like I'm in something like 27 Exerd character discords.
Oh
There's
my
one for every
god.
character. I can't even remember if it's 27. It's just a lot. It's a
Yeah, I can
lot. So there's like
imagine.
the main Exerd cord, and then one for like Kai Kiske, friggin' Soul Bad Guy, Jacko, May, Faust, all this stuff.
Were they keeping like secret tech that they wouldn't post on the main Exer
It
Discord
was
or something?
no, because there wasn't tech posted on the main Exerd Discord. Everyone's
Okay.
thought back then, it's like, oh, of course we would have a Discord for every character. You know, all the mains for every character want to like talk amongst themselves, um, or all the character mains, yeah, would stick to their own area.
Okay.
Um, so then people would like make Google Docs that would sit in like Discord pins or what is it, paste bins even.
Yeah. I think I've dug through
What
a
else?
few of those. Yeah.
Evernotes. There's a lot of good Exerd Evernotes out there, but where the hell are they? Right? Like
Yeah.
where are they? And we realized toward not after Exerd and maybe around the Unist era, like so we're talking like a few years ago, I think everyone collectively realized that Discord kind of sucks for collaborative work if you want like a permanent place for information. It's
Okay.
good for collaborating and like researching tech actively, but when it comes to like placing all that finished work somewhere, it sucks because
Yeah.
it's like buried in pins, it's not very visible, you know, you
The
don't
pins aren't
know.
necessarily organized.
Yeah, to
It's all
get to
just
the
kind of
information,
messy.
yeah, to get to the information you want, you have to like go to a Discord. How is it divided up? Are there alternate Discords? Are there like character Discords? Like what the hell's going on? And so I think everyone is like these days is like, okay, Discord sort of like a failed experiment. It's great when you need to like rope a bunch of people in. It's like, hey, we're gonna lab this stuff. But what do you do with the stuff you've labbed? You store it on a wiki. Wiki is front facing, it's clean. 3 clicks to get to the information you want, right? You go to the main page, you click the game, you click the character, you get your table of contents or like your headers. You know exactly where everything is in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
And so that brings us to today. That's like Dustloop's role. It's the final repository, the library for like all research and development that comes out of fighting game discords, fighting game communities, yeah.
Yeah, and so kind of that's a big undertaking because obviously it's kind of collecting all this information from however many discords, God knows how many just for a single game like Xrd, let alone you throw in a KOF or a BBCF or a BB tag and all those all those games. How much time and effort goes into this, because this is all volunteer based from my understanding, right?
So we have a bunch of volunteer people working on the back end of Dustloop. So they're sort of behind. There was a recent back end update, or if you checked out Discord right now versus 2 weeks ago, it looks very different now. So there was a big refit of, I don't know what it is, media wiki or something, the stuff that makes up the building blocks of the wiki were updated. And that is a huge undertaking, because that's in web development, things will just start to fall apart at the seams as you update or refit. Maybe you had bespoke code somewhere operating the website, and it's uh-oh, that doesn't work now, we got to fix that. So for those guys, I don't do any of that. I don't do any programming of note. So they were at wit's end for the better part of a week or two, and they still might be. I think the fires have been put out mostly.
That's good
but
to hear.
They were super stressed over it. They were staying up way too late, blood, sweat, and tears. And that's just for kind of the look of the website. That has nothing to do with all the information, the content. People are spending hours and hours a day uploading video, or cutting and uploading video for combo videos and stuff, or guides. People are putting up images. Don't even get me started on what it takes to get hitbox data onto the wiki. So I'm sure there are hundreds of people involved in what Dustloop is today, and it is a monstrous amount of work. It is humongous.
Okay, and on that topic, kind of how much, this is just to maintain the website and everything, how do you manage so many games? Not just fighting games, because that obviously that's the big draw of Dustloop, but you also have some other games. I believe the term was guest games or something.
Guest games?
There? Yeah.
So whatever, it's a mix of the collective will of the anime fighting game community.
Okay.
And whatever people have the gumption for, essentially. So I think King's Raid, or was it? It's not King's Raid. What am I saying?
I can look real quick, actually.
King's Raid's a mobile game, isn't it? What am I thinking?
I am not sure. I think there's King's Field.
King's Field 4. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. King's Raid. Oh, what is that? King's Raid. Either way, King's Raid 4. One of the guys who does a huge amount of work keeping the website going, which is Tarkus. He loves From Software games, so he's there's no good King's Field wiki. I don't like it from what I can find online.
Myself?
So he went and he made it himself. He scraped the data from the game, put it up, hosted. And honestly, when it comes to guest games or these kind of sillier projects that aren't necessarily fighting games, it's okay, because obviously if we had a million different non-fighting games on the wiki, it would get a little messy. But because we are mindful of the front page, right? No one's getting Kingsfield 4 shoved in their face when they're coming to the wiki to look for Battle Fantasia or DNF Duel or Guilty Gear.
Yeah.
Right? So it hasn't been an issue at all.
Okay.
It's just a funny thing that sometimes someone might have a little hee-ho and make a whole Kingsfield wiki.
Yeah.
It's just how it is.
Okay, and so kind of moving more towards what you do and your content creation, because you, in addition to working with Dustloop, you also make tutorial videos regarding Guilty Gear, but are very applicable to almost any other fighting game I've found, at least. What inspired that? Because yeah.
Okay. Let's see. So I've made tech videos and stuff before, and I used to be a fiendish Discord poster. People would come and ask me stuff on Discord, or we'd be having conversations, and I would just type way too much. I would give like a 2-page dissertation on like the best place to use Faust 5K in neutral, and it was just awful. It was terrible. It's hard to digest. I'm pretty sure I got a bunch of stuff wrong, and like it was just a lot.
Yeah.
And one day, someone asked me about Faust Oki, like running Oki as Faust without like FDC jump K, his instant overhead stuff, whatever. It's just like, I was just like doing an Oki tutorial. And I cut up a video that was 24 minutes long. The audio was bad. I think I repeated myself like 8 times, and it was just a disaster. And I made it, I uploaded it. I was too lazy to do any like extra work. And I'm like, hey, this video is garbage, but here you go. And the person was like, oh, thank you. And the more I watched the video back, the more I was like, this is actually terrible. This is the worst thing I've ever created in the history of anything. It's slow. It's long-winded. It's just me sitting there. It's still on my channel, maybe. It's just like a long talk on Faust Okazemi or something.
Yeah.
And around that time, shortly after, I think Sagem had a little spat on Twitter. There was some FGC drama, very light drama, not actual drama, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, we need more short form tutorial videos, because these long ass ramble vids are not doing anyone any favors.
No. And so you kind of felt subtweeted.
Right. Yeah. And I was like, no, but I was in full agreement, because like I was in that moment, I was already stewing on the self-loathing for my own piece of content that I had just made. I'm like, oh my god, this is so bad.
I can relate to that from some early like attempts at video essays I tried making. Ugh.
Yeah. So shortly after that, probably just before Strive came out, a Japanese player, and his name escapes me sadly, posted a little tiny short form video guide with some aerial text, a little strip of like a black bar along the bottom to make the text pop a little more. And it was just straight and to the point. It just talked about like, I forget what it was. It was just like the basics of like using projectiles in neutral or something in Exit.
Okay, yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
I'm going to copy his work. And I stole his format. I was just like, oh, you made this, I made this. So you can find that. It's old. It's on my channel. And it was just like a very, very short form tutorial. We're talking like a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes. Just like an introduction to Plus R Faust. And I was like, damn, this is the best way to do character content. This is the best. It's absolutely 100% the best. So fast forward to Strive, and I was like, okay, I would like to do this, my own way, something that's easy to read, easy to parse through, or easier. No nonsense, right? I would like to make something I could put on a wiki, essentially, because like, a lot of content is like, maximum engagement, maximum content.
Yeah,
I was like,
gotta get to 8 minutes so that you get 2 ads, no swearing in the first 10 seconds, all the circus games.
For reference material, I don't think I could put that on a wiki, right? There's just too much in between the goods and the player trying to learn. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just compress this as much as I can. I can have maybe a joke or two in it somewhere, but it's just going to be a gray thumbnail, white text. It's real basic, The title is exactly what it says, exactly what's in the video, and that's going to be how I do things. And it's just going to be condensed, compressed as much as I can, because eloquence is something that doesn't come naturally to me. I talk a lot, as you might have noticed. I love
I'm
to
in the
talk.
same boat.
So I talk too much. So the video format forces me to be more concise.
And that brings us to today and your most recent one, kind of getting into the weeds of content creation, because I know everyone's creative process is different. Like mine's probably pretty kooky to someone outside, from an outside perspective, but like, is it thoroughly planned? It kind of sounds like it is, but do you have off the cuff stuff, or do you kind of plan it out from point A to point B to point C?
So for neutral.mp4, I did a lot more planning than I normally do.
Okay.
I feel like if you watch my earlier content, you can kind of tell I'm like winging it. Rarely do I use a script for anything. I will actually just like sit down in training mode, have OBS open to capture, and I'll literally like build an idea or like have like something I want to say, and I will capture a clip representing what I'm trying to say in that moment. If I need more time, I will duplicate the clip and slow it down and play it again while I'm talking, and then I'll move on to the next idea. I've been doing this kind of like almost a lot of my videos are circular, right? I'll like start at like I'll enter at some point into like Oki or like a pressure situation or whatever, and I'm like, okay, here's a breakdown of this situation. Here are your answers. Here is how your opponent will adjust. Here's how you adjust to your opponent's adjustment, and eventually you'll end up back at the starting point. A lot of my videos are like that, and they close like that. Neutral.mp4 was like that as well.
Yeah, back to rock, good old rock.
This structure, I feel, of like having like a complete structure is very important, because it doesn't explain everything, but it at least gives you a full picture of like what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
You know.
So when making your content, or just kind of for your own play, because obviously you don't just make tutorials, you also play these games yourself. Do you take concepts from other genres? Do you even watch like other genres, FPSs or MOBAs or
I watch a lot
RTSs?
of card games.
A lot of card games?
A lot of Hearthstone, a lot of Battlegrounds.
Are there any concepts you take from that and you kind of like apply to fighting games? Because I found
no, absolutely not.
Really?
It's like an escape.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, because I asked because I found Core Gaming and like your stuff too. I found that when I try to like just thinking about it and breaking it down into fundamental ideas, I could apply a lot of the concepts to FPS games like Siege or Valorant. Not necessarily Titanfall, because that's just so fast-paced. Positioning isn't as important, but like these slow-paced games, you kind of are able to apply some concepts of like not necessarily footsies, but resource management and all that stuff. So I was just kind of curious if you had any similar like inspiration from other genres.
I think a lot of my my understanding is rooted in fighting games, and when I go to other genres, I will impress fighting games upon those other genres.
Interesting.
Because a lot of my learning about reactions and how they play, like how reactions play into decision making, how human adjustment develops in a given situation. I learned all of that in fighting games.
Okay.
So, in head-to-head experiences or competitive environments, usually I'm always thinking about it in terms of what I know from fighting games.
Okay.
So I know players react in anywhere from, 14 frames if they're just Twitch reaction, which is like the fastest I've seen, or like 20 some odd frames if they are, just generally trying to react to stuff. More if they're surprised or something's unexpected. I might use that to like break down a situation where I'm like, hey, could I have reacted better in that situation? Did my opponent react, or did they actually just like make a guess? Like a read in a given situation? Are they operating on prediction, or, what's that situation like? How does that pan out? So there are a lot of other I feel like a question that I'll ask a lot, or I find myself asking a lot when venturing into other genres, is, "Hey, is that reactable?" And I'll get weird looks. I'll get real strange looks from people. They'll be like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Yeah, is that like, could I answer that on reaction? Like, could I like pop a shield or something on reaction to this maneuver they're doing?" And they're like,
Yeah, I can
I don't
I
know.
can imagine because just thinking about like Siege or something. If I asked a teammate like, "Hey, was that reactable?" It's like, I don't know. Could you hear of a C4 or could you not? Like, and
Yeah,
like how fast did you have? And then obviously like moving aims, you're not limited by frame data or anything. So like in
yeah,
theory, if you move your mouse fast enough, yeah, it is reactable. The question is, are you fast enough to react?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
to close out, I kind of want to talk about the state of the FGC, especially post COVID, because you mentioned Frosty Fausting is coming up before we started
Yes.
recording, and I went to ECT myself, my first fighting game
Ooh.
event in post COVID, but obviously that's a much different looking event compared to probably what it used to be if I had to guess. Like we were wearing masks the entire time. I imagine there was a bunch of other things that changed
I
in
like the
between.
masks because historically, like everyone gets sick at fighting game tournaments,
The
like
the post
before
con
COVID.
flu.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. Tourney bug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like so what is the state of the FGC like? Are locals kind of coming back? Are they forever changed? What about majors? Like are there
Ooh.
less majors? Are
It
they more
is.
important?
Yeah. I have a lot to say on the subject. I think it's very spooky because the cost of booking a venue has grown so much over the past like even before COVID, it was starting to rise, and COVID, you know, hurt a lot of local economies. Suddenly, there's a bunch of people like rushing back into the world to do tourism, so the cost of spaces has dramatically risen. Um, Cost of living, cost of travel, cost of everything's going up, and so you need more people in a venue paying more money to be at the venue to make the venue sustainable. And so these sort of like mid-sized events um, are really struggling, right? There's not enough revenue, there's not enough profit or whatever to like keep things on the up and up. Obviously, there are still events that are doing just fine.
Yeah.
Um,
Like I imagine Evo's probably not struggling nearly as much as
yeah,
something more mid-sized, but not quite a
yeah,
local.
they have like major corporate backing, right? So it
Yeah,
doesn't matter. They're like immune, right? Because Sony will just be like, yeah, we'll just pay, we'll foot the bill.
yeah,
Um, so it's harder for those independent orgs or the smaller orgs, right? Um, they're less mobile. They're less, um, oh, like if something goes wrong, they really feel it.
yeah.
And
They're
so you're
more
like
vulnerable to it.
yeah, you're one catastrophe away from just like, well, we can't run any more events because it's just too expensive. We've eaten through our savings. We're not making enough money, so on and so forth. Um, and that also goes for local events. So we lost a venue going into COVID. Two venues? One or two venues going into COVID. We just got one now, but it hasn't been good for the businesses involved, right? So
Okay.
they're more staying open out of, it feels almost like desperation as opposed to like profitability,
Yeah.
right? So I feel really bad for that. Like every city that I take a look at, it's like, oh, this venue closed, this place couldn't stay open, all this stuff. Um, so yeah, we're definitely hurting, and it probably hurt a lot of the momentum that local events had, um, that we had going and developing.
Are we
So
seeing kind of like a recovery, like however slow?
yeah,
Are we on the up and up again, or is it still
yeah.
kind of?
There's obviously recovery because like people are going back to events, and I feel like there's a huge amount of interest in events, like right now.
It's just the
Like it's
logistics from
huge.
the TO side.
Yeah. But it's like where could have we have been sans COVID, right?
Yeah, and kind of.
So
Um, I know international play is kind of a very unique thing in the FGC compared to esports, but obviously international play gets affected by a global pandemic. And
Yeah.
how has international play just in general been affected when it comes to these big events? Like, obviously, you do have the Japanese and the Korean players and the European players come for Evo, but maybe not other tournaments. Or like, how has that been affected? Are we gonna see like a wave of Pakistani Tekken players come to Frosting Faustings, or are we gonna have?
I don't know what their travel schedule is like.
Yeah, I was just picking a random demographic.
Yeah. The issue is like the cost of travel has progressed to the point where things are like getting kind of wild. The yen has fallen dramatically, so traveling out of country for Japan is like nonsense. Obviously, they have Evo Japan coming up, and I know a lot of people are going, from the U.S. to Japan. That might be the play going forward, right? If the yen is cheap, right, it's easier to like ship everyone in as opposed to like send the Japanese players out. So we'll probably see more international stuff happening. But like we'll have to wait and see, because it's like the economies of it right now are like, it's not sustainable for like, you don't look at like the most well-off players or the most obvious like,
the sponsored players aren't the ones that we need to look at and be concerned. It's
there's a demographic of player in like the middle. So the sponsored player that's maybe like can only go to so many events a year. The sponsored player that is maybe just like can only afford to travel locally, or
the
like
top player who
state
isn't
to
sponsored and has to keep working their
put their own bill, right?
Yeah.
So there's like it's always on like a spectrum, right?
Okay.
So your top players can probably travel a lot more, whereas you're just going to see a larger. You don't see them because they're not going anywhere, but that's why I talk about like momentum being sort of like hamstrung because of COVID, right? So you'd probably see more players doing more things across borders had we not had COVID, just because like the beating the economy took made travel just like less sustainable.
Okay. And I guess, that kind of brings us to Rollback, which is, Rollback, I think it can't be understated, because, like, you look at how Strive's done, you look at...
Yeah.
I think
Save that game.
Save Strive, I mean, it brought Exerd back into relevancy, plus R.
Yeah.
I think KOF has some variation of it. And Street Fighter 6 is looking to have one.
Yeah.
So it's like almost...
They're doing their best.
Universal shift to Rollback, but at the same time, it also is almost out of necessity. Do you think like online results have more meaning now? Because at least in FPSs,
it depends entirely on like, it depends entirely on the state of the connection at the time of the match. Okay. That's it. That's all. Right. So if you're playing it on like 150 ms connection, that is a 150 ms game of Strive or whatever it is you're playing. If you're experiencing 2 frames of rollback, that's a 2 rollback frame game. That's probably pretty that's parity to offline. That's pretty close. So you'd be like, oh wow, that connection was great. This match is worth a lot, or it's like very comparable to offline play, right? It's not Guilty Gear, but it's a different game, right? It's just that's just what it is.
Yeah, all the memes about Kai's overhead and Exerd or whatever, just kind of...
Yeah, he's going to be rolling back into Greed Sever. Yeah, that's right. So that's just like a reality of the situation. I think depending on like how a match went will determine whether or not people are like, oh, this is legit, right? Because on a good connection, you might be able to react to like 5D, like from most of the characters in Strive.
Yeah.
And if there's even like a few frames of rollback, those 5Ds become completely invisible, and it's like, all right. Well, I guess this is an invisible 5D now. I guess this whole matchup has changed dynamics. Stuff like that.
Okay, cool. And then last thing, anything you want to shout out or anything like that, because we're nearing the 30-minute mark, and I don't want to just...
Dustloop, good. Dustloop, excellent. Big shout outs to everyone who's been working on that. It's been, just did a big update, so it looks super fresh. So check it out if you want fighting game info for
It
all
does
your
look
favorite
clean.
anime air dashers, right? Yeah. Frosty Faustings. I'll be at Frosty Faustings in February, early Feb. I'll be bringing a gachapon machine to that, giving away some prizes. I
I
think.
saw that.
Yeah.
I think if I wasn't going to the 6 Invitational in Feb in Montreal, I definitely probably would have been trying to go to something like Frosty. But
Yeah. When it comes to like recommendations for events, it's like Frosty Faustings and Combo Breaker, at least from someone living in Ontario, Canada. Those are like prime events to go to because it's a cheaper flight. So it's just like easier, cheaper to get to, right? So
Yeah.
for the price of one trip to Evo, I could go to like Combo Breaker and Frosty Faustings.
Oh, the twofer.
Yeah. So if you're in Ontario or the Canada region, consider hitting up Illinois for your events.
Sweet. And